Welcome along to the Play On podcast, a brand new podcast from A State of Mind Media. My name's David Simmonds. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio with my colleagues Anthony Brown and Stephen Commins, who are part of the team for the Play On podcast. As I say, my name's David Simmonds. We're going to be looking back on the weekend's football in action. Now, before we get started, it is our very first show. We're fully interactive on social media. If there's anything you want to join in the conversation with, feel free to give us a little comment. We'll give you a mention and maybe even review your point as well. Before we do get started, there's a couple of things that we do want to touch on over the weekend. Obviously, there was a sad passing of Marius Zaliukas, ex-Hearts captain. Anthony Brown, we'll come to you first. You're a Scottish football writer. You've covered a lot of things to do with Heart and Midlothian. Did you cross paths with Marius at all?
Yeah, I did. I probably started covering Hearts initially in the period when around about 2012, and I can't remember how many press conferences I did that he was involved in, but certainly one or two. And I remember one quite vividly because he was a very sort of different character to what you might be used to normally. Very liked a bit of banter, could be a wee bit sort of prickly with certain questions, but he was just a big sort of likeable guy. I mean, I remember asking him in 2012, it was maybe a month before the semi-final a couple of weeks before the semi-final between Hearts and Celtic. Obviously at that point the Edinburgh Derby final was still some way off because most people expected Celtic to win. And I remember asking him, what would you make of a Hearts-Hibs semi-final or something along those lines? And he went, "Oh, that would be fucking brilliant." And he was like, usually you'd get a sort of answer, "Oh, well, one game at a time, let's just concentrate on the Celtic game." But he was embracing this game before it had even become a real live possibility. They've just, as I said, I wouldn't profess to know him particularly well. I bumped into him a couple of times on nights out. He was always a sort of happy-go-lucky type of character. I mean, from speaking to his teammates and hearing what they've got to say, like Sir Ian McGowan, Andy Driver, Jamie McDonald, I mean, he was just a good guy, good teammate, just real colourful character and a good person about the dressing room and a leader, really. And it's utterly tragic that he's 36. I mean, I think it's really affected me the past few days, more so than a lot of other footballer deaths. And I don't know, obviously, I think it's possibly because he's the first one that I've ever known that's younger than me who's passed away. And I think that's probably why it's had such a profound effect. But apart from that, he was a real quality defender for Hearts. He grew into a real, I mean, let's not forget, he had these tough times at the start, but he grew to be a real quality defender. Probably, if you take away Stephen Presley and Andy Webster, you're then looking at him and Christophe Berra as being the next rung of sort of centre-backs of the 21st century, if you like. I mean, Zaliukas is right up there. And it's, as a person, as a footballer, as a father, it's just horrifying news.
Yeah, I mean, the news broke at half-time in the semi-final at the weekend. Stephen, I'll welcome you on the show. Do you think that had an impact on maybe the players' performance? Obviously went out 1, but obviously that news spreads the likes of Robbie Nielsen, who's played alongside Zaliukas. How do you think that affected him?
Well, I think Robbie's said already that he kind of only heard a couple of minutes before the game actually kicked off, and he chose not to mention it to the players because there's a number of players, I think Tony, you had said on Twitter, there's a number of players that played with him at either Hearts, Leeds, maybe Rangers, that would have known him personally as well as just like him being an ex-captain of the club. So I mean, I back everything, I echo everything that Anthony said, that in terms of it's tragic obviously what happened, and it's very sad on a kind of a human level more than anything else. But as a club captain and somebody who kind of, I think one journalist famously kind of said that it was a faceless cast of thousands, all these Lithuanians when they came across and on mass trials under Romanov, and he was one of the ones that kind of stuck by us and kind of stayed where he was. I mean, don't get me wrong, he was probably handsomely paid for it as well, but he was in that sort of no man's land between 2006, which was a really successful team, 2012, which then went on to become a successful team. And by the time that 2012 team came around, I mean, they saw fit to make him the captain in a team that contained Andy Webster, Ian Black, who was a die-hard Hearts guy, Jamie McDonald, who'd been in and around the club a long time. Zaliukas was still the captain at that point. So I think that spoke kind of volumes for the way he was in and around the club. So yeah, as I say, I echo the sentiments for Anthony too.
I think what come as much a shock to me is that I wasn't even aware he was ill. Was it common knowledge, Anthony, or was it like a silent illness that he had, or what was the background to it, mate?
It certainly wasn't common knowledge over here. I mean, I don't know. In Lithuania, it was maybe known a lot. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly you wouldn't like to speculate about how well known it was, but in terms of his teammates over here, I'm in a WhatsApp chat with some of them, and they didn't know. They found out at the same time as me when it got announced on the telly on Saturday night, and it's. I mean, I think that probably tells you that it was kept under wraps to a pretty large extent, and motor neuron disease, it's an utterly horrific illness, obviously, as we saw with what happened to Fernando Rickson, what's happened with Doddy Weir.
Yeah.
It seems to be happening to a lot of sports people, and it's 36. Horrible. I mean, I found out at half-time, I was just about to go on a podcast myself at half-time with young Aaron Fraser, a wee Hearts fan, to talk about my book, and just as I was about to go on, I saw somebody tweet the reports saying Marios Zalukas has passed away. And at first you don't believe it. You're like, no, that can't be
surely
it.
not.
And so I was thinking, do I go on? Like, we only had a minute or two to decide whether I went on. So the young guy was waiting for me to go on. So I went on air, and he had just got wind of it as well, and he's asking me about it. And I was like, well, I'm reluctant to talk about it at this stage because it's not been confirmed.
Yeah.
And then it got confirmed. It was just a horrible situation, and it completely overshadowed the second half and the last few days for me. I couldn't concentrate on the game, to be honest. I mean, the second half was all a bit of a blur. I remember the goals, I remember the key incidents, but I can't really feel the game, if you know what I mean. I couldn't tell you instinctively whether Hearts deserved to win, whether Hibs deserved to win, because my head was away. I was
just caught up in emotion, mate.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, I don't profess to know the guy to any level, but he's a guy that served Hearts for 6 years, captain of the club, won one of the biggest matches in their history, and is clearly loved by players, teammates, supporters, and management and what have you that worked with him. It's just a really, I mean, the fact it happened in a Hearts Hibs game at Hampden, which was his defining moment as a footballer, it's just
that irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thanks to Fraser Ogilvie, our very first comment on the Play On podcast. Very sad news, passing of a Hearts hero. Yeah, we completely echo that, Fraser, as well. Thanks for your comments. If you do want to get in touch, please do post a comment. We'll give you a mention, and we'll discuss the comment that you post as well. And then we will get to the action very shortly, because obviously that news must have affected teammates of Hearts, like you say, the Robbie Nielsen's, etc. He chose to keep that quiet. One thing that I wouldn't say it was common knowledge, but we were aware of it breaking, was the sad passing of Kevin Nisbet's dad earlier in the week, and he still came out and played in the semi, obviously. That must have been an extremely hard thing for him to do, Stephen, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. On a sort of personal level, yeah, I mean, obviously he's a professional football player. He's a guy who's kind of taken his step up. He's kind of had to go down the way to come back up. So he's at a point in his career where he's probably going to be like as high as he can, as he's been up till now. And then for something like that to happen in your personal life, I mean, from what I'd read earlier, I think his dad had been pretty unwell for quite a while, and they'd known that it was obviously terminal liver cancer. So that in itself is obviously something that you need to kind of get your head round. But then for him to, I think he'd said in his statement that he had to kind of rush away from training on the Tuesday. His dad then passed away on the Wednesday. So even if you look at it just from a football point of view, his preparation is in the run-up to what was a big game would have been all over the place, and his head and his emotions probably the same. I think he'd said that Jack Ross and the Hibs management team had offered and said, listen, you can sit the game out, there's going to be no pressure from us for you to play, but he had promised his dad that he wanted to play in the game. So you can only take your hat off to the guy. As I say, a great talent, a good up-and-coming young player in Scottish football, somebody that probably Steve Clarke is looking at this moment in time as well, and you take your hat off to him for playing in the game. Unfortunately, he missed the penalty, which ultimately meant that Hearts won the game. But he'd said himself that wasn't anything to do with where his head was at. It's just his judgment wasn't great at the time. And
no, that's
so,
understandable.
Yeah, obviously full sympathy go to him.
hats off for coming out and playing. That's the main thing, isn't it? Superb. He promised his dad, he came out, he did it. Thanks to Ian McIntosh for the news. Terrible news about Marius. Glad Hearts got the win for him at the weekend. Let's discuss that. Hearts won 2-1 at Hampden, taking them through to the Scottish Cup final. What was your thoughts on the game? Because it was a game of, you hear the phrase, a game of two halves. It was more a game of two penalties. What was your thoughts on the game, Anthony?
Well, as I said, a lot of my recollections of the game are clouded by obviously the sort of tragedy of Marius Lucas, but certainly it was a very tight game. I think most people expected it to be that way. I certainly expected it to be that way, and I always felt there was a good chance it could go extra time, possibly even penalties. For me, there's not a great deal between the teams on paper and player for player. I get that Hibs are a league above and they're in good form in the Premiership, but for me, those two teams on paper, they could play each other 10 times. They'd probably win 5 games each. So I don't think there's a great deal between them. Hibs maybe slightly more in terms of being a wee bit more secure at centre back. But on Saturday, I mean, Hibs probably shaded overall play, I would say. Probably more a victory for battle and spirit from Hearts rather than flamboyant football. I thought Hearts started well the first 15 minutes. I thought they had a real good period of play, and then Hibs obviously came on pretty strong for the rest of the first half and should have been ahead. Obviously Craig Gordon made that wonder save, and McGuinness had his shot charged down by Michael Smith. Second half, as I said, for me it's a bit of a blur. I just can't really analyse it properly, but certainly it seemed to be a very even game, and obviously Boyce had the big chance, and Hibs had a couple of chances. Doidge's overhead kick, very sort of, I didn't really feel it was ever going to, I couldn't see either team running away with it at any point. It never felt like it was going to go that way. And I mean, had Nisbet scored the penalty, you could have said Hibs marginally deserved the win. Yeah. Equally, Hearts winning it, you can't say it was a robbery or anything like that. It was a very tight game. Yeah, overall.
Stephen, what's your opinion on the penalties? Because as I said, it was a game of two penalties. There was a chance of 3 very, very soft penalties in that game, don't you think?
I don't think any of them were penalties, to be honest. Certainly the one just at the end of normal time, when they kind of had 2 bites at the cherry. I think it was a case of there was a bit of desperate defending from Halkett, but also I think Boyle the second time, and I don't even know who it was the first time, was just looking to throw himself down at any sort of touch. And I think having the fifth officials or whatever they're called behind the goals at that point was probably a massive, it was a positive point, because I think at that point Bobby Madden or whoever it was behind the goals was able to say, nah, no chance. But then if you roll forward to the ones, so you've got the one where Popescu pulls out at the challenge. You could argue that potentially his knee's grazed against Newell's knee, but I mean, anyone who's been involved with football will know that he was going down before the knee had come near him. So for me, that wasn't a penalty at all. But if you look at it from a certain angle, you can see Bobby Madden, who's behind the goals, going yes, yes, yes. So he's given that. Yep. So you've got to give the referee, Willie Collum, a bit of kind of slack on that, because from the angle he's at, he's just seen Popescu put himself into that challenge and the guy go down. So Bobby Madden's got a clear view of it. The Hearts penalty, again, for me, not a penalty either. But we were saying earlier that it's very reminiscent to the penalty that we got in the 98 Cup final when Stevie Fulton went down. So kind of the momentum's all going one way, and a slight nudge just kind of pushes them. So but for me, none of them were penalties at all. But
no, you mentioned obviously you've got the officials, the fifth officials, that what they're called, behind the goals,
the behind the goal refs,
and obviously we had goal line technology in the semis this weekend. I think if we have VAR like they do have down south, those aren't penalties. Those are definitely not penalties. What's your opinion on VAR, Anthony? Sorry.
Is
it a good thing for the game? Is it a bad thing? Do you think the Premiership in England's benefited from it, or
no? Personally, I don't think. I think it's caused a lot of sort of confusion. It's taken a bit of the instinctive passion out of the game, because people are waiting to see what's going to get awarded, or whether a goal's going to get chalked off or whatever. I mean, certainly there's room for some form of technology, but I'm not really feeling it with VAR, I have to say.
No, definitely
I don't think there's enough at stake up here for. I mean, I know I'm probably going to get slaughtered for that for the Rangers and Celtic fans, but in terms of in England, the reason that they've got VAR is because like one decision in England could cost a team. I mean, look at Sheffield United. When Sheffield United got relegated when Tevez and and Mascherano were at West Ham, they ended up getting like hundreds of millions in compensation because like a decision that had been made at a higher level had cost them a place in the league. So you could argue that one poor refereeing decision can do that, and that's the reason that they've put that in place. It's nothing to do with trying to help the refs, because if you were really honest and you sat any of those referees down in England who are professional guys earning a lot of money from what they do, you sat them down, had an honest conversation with them and said, what do you think about this? They are massively undermined by what happens. They're not allowed, apparently, to go and view the pitch side monitors. I think the guy did in the Spurs game on the weekend.
He did, yeah.
It's one of the first times that we've seen it in English football. So what is the point of it? Like they're giving offside decisions for guys' fingernails and shoulder blades being out of position, and it's just ruining the spontaneity of games, as Anthony said. That, like, if obviously fans are not there at the moment, but any fans, when you're in the ground, I've seen numerous times that fans have been talking about getting an 85th or an 86th minute winner in a game, and their first instinct is to look up at the screen and see if there's VAR decision pending, or that's wrong to me. Like, you don't pay your money. Like, football fans don't. It's like an addiction. Getting a last minute winner in a game can be spoke about for years.
Yep.
And if you're not getting that experience anymore because you're staring at a screen and waiting for 45 seconds for someone in a studio to make a decision, to me, keep that as far away from Scottish football as possible.
Definitely. Let's keep it as it is. Thanks again to Fraser Ogilvie's putting another message up saying VAR is a good tool for football, but it's used so poorly in England. Look at Germany and Australia. Brilliant examples of it. Now, excuse me, Fraser, I am not too up to speed in how it's used in Germany, Australia. I will look into it. And but like you say, Stephen, let's keep it away from Scottish football. Let's just leave it.
The Australia one's a really good example because they actually mic'd up the refs for a while as well.
Okay.
So they had a period where they were trying to obviously show the viewing public and the wider kind of world, this is how we use VAR. And they had all the referees mic'd up. They could hear everything that the refs were saying during the game.
Right.
And so the referee was communicating to the fourth official, the VAR refs, and saying, all I need to know is, during this phase of play, did this happen? So he isn't saying to the referee in the studio, is that a penalty? He's saying, if that guy crossed path at that point, then I'm going to give a penalty because all I need to know is was there contact at this point. So it was actually quite an interesting insight on how they use it. But whether that's how they use it in England is, I don't think it is, to be honest.
Nah, Joseph Jack, VAR is robbing us of iconic moments. I 100% agree with that, mate. Some good moments from the Hearts Hibs semi-final was obviously from man of the match Craig Gordon. At 38-year-old now, Anthony, is he? 37, 38? Yeah. He's still pulling off world. He's absolute class. Reaction saves, if you like. He's still top of his game. Did you envisage him coming back in that form when he joined back at Hearts?
I think we knew he was going to be an upgrade on what Hearts have had
Definitely.
in the last season or two. I think, regardless of what form he was in, that was always going to be the case. But
I think I would have been an upgrade on that.
I think he's certainly he's almost gone back to sort of early noughties levels of form in terms of what he's pulling off at the minute. His saves are just, and he's making saves in games where he's not got too much to do. He's pulling these saves off out when he's relatively cold. I mean, what a difference that is for Hearts. That's going to earn them a lot of points. It's going to win them a lot of games this year, just having a guy of that calibre. Not only is it the saves he's making, it's the confidence he's putting in the defence.
Absolutely.
Because
I
the
agree with
defence
that.
last year were a bag of nerves because of the goalkeeper behind them.
Yeah.
So to have a guy of Gordon's quality.
If you look at guys like Halkett, like I think there's a lot of Hearts fans have maybe questioned Craig Halkett because they saw what he did at Livingston and then went, well, he's been nowhere near that level for Hearts. But what you need to remember is any defender, whether it's Craig Halkett or anyone else, if you are looking at a ball going over your head and going, right, that's going through the keeper, no worries, I'll get back to my position, then that's fine. But see, when you've got a goalie or a number of goalies in Hearts' case behind you and you're seeing a ball going over your head going, I'm not sure he's going to catch this. So I'm going to have to maybe get ready for a parry out, or like he would be constantly second guessing what was going to happen. Whereas I think you've got somebody like Craig Gordon, as I think Nielsen said it after the game, like that save that he made from Nisbet's header in the first half. Nielsen said I wasn't even surprised. Like I wasn't even like he says I was just laughing because I thought
a higher standard that's expected. Yeah. Brilliant. I mean, that kind of leads us on to the other semi-final, Celtic Aberdeen. Celtic are obviously playing Scott Bain in goals for this game. I think Barkas is actually still injured. Do you think maybe Neil Lennon maybe let Craig Gordon go a season too soon, guys? Anthony, what do you think on that?
Certainly looks that way at the minute, doesn't it? I mean, he's playing at a level now where you could reasonably make a case for him being Scotland's number one. I mean, I know David Marshall was in the last time and is doing really well, and the gloves are his to lose.
Well, look at how long Buffon played for Italy.
But I mean, Marshall's got the gloves just now. I'd be very surprised if he didn't start against Serbia, but you'd be astonished if Gordon's not at least in the squad when it's announced for the game next week.
Well, this is the thing, like, he's had Robbie McCrory for Rangers in the squad.
Yeah.
He's obviously looking to bring in a number of kind of younger guys to kind of show them, especially in the goalkeeping position. There's no point really in having a 38-year-old coming along and being your third choice goalie. I mean,
no, he's got that experience at that level.
100%. Like, if you've got, especially for the games that are coming up for Scotland, they're so important, and experience is key. If you've got a guy like Craig Gordon, I mean, I don't profess to know Craig Gordon in any personal terms at all, but when he's been through what he has been in his career, like, even just from a motivational point of view, he's played in the Premier League in England. He's played for over the last 10 years the best team in Scotland. He's obviously been successful at Hearts. So having somebody in and around the squad with that experience over a Robbie McCrory. So if you are going to, this is what I'm saying, your third choice goalie is never going to play. So why not have someone who's actually maybe going to have that wee 1% that might help someone in a different position? So yeah, I think it's a no-brainer for him to come in to the Scotland
while
squad.
we're talking on the subject to the Scottish national team, what's your opinion on Nisbet? Does he deserve a call-up, Anthony? Think he should be in the Scotland squad?
He's certainly having a good season. I mean, the Scotland squad he's probably knocking on the door, I would suggest. I mean, on the basis that Mark McNulty got in to the Scotland squad after doing well at Hibs. I think Nisbet's probably doing at least as well as McNulty was doing at that point. So yeah, I mean, he's certainly got claims. I mean, I would suggest that you'd maybe be looking towards Lee Griffiths first, because he's obviously got the experience at playing that level, and he's a bit of a talisman. Well, he was looking like shaping up as being a talisman for Scotland before he obviously had these issues. But I mean, certainly it wouldn't be a massive surprise if Nisbet was to be in the squad. He's one of probably a few who will be in contention for an attacking position.
Yeah, so semi-final number 2 on Sunday, obviously seen Celtic run out 2-0 winners against Aberdeen. A fairly confident win, a great strike from Ryan Christie, and a second tap-in from Elyounoussi. 2-0 winners over Aberdeen. I don't think Bain was even tested at all, to be honest, so quite a comfortable win. Who do you fancy for the final, guys? It's going to be different, isn't it? Because it's a Christmas final, isn't it? It's last year's Scottish, if you like. Who do you fancy? Start with you, Stephen.
I mean,
it would go with your heart and your head.
My heart and my head is both saying Heart of Midlothian Football Club. But listen, Celtic have won, 36 cup games in a row.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's going to be difficult. We all know that. But potentially one of the worst Hearts teams I've ever seen, where a guy who was managing them, who was on his way out, even at that point, ran Celtic very close in last year's final. So listen, Hearts are going to have a good day. There's no denying that. There's no debate. They're going to have to rely on the experienced guys in the team. Your Naismiths, your Hallidays to an extent as well.
And obviously Craig Gordon,
yeah.
What about yourself, Anthony? How do you see it panning out on December 20th?
I think a lot will depend on what sort of form Celtic are in when that time comes round. Obviously Celtic have been a mixed bag so far, obviously pretty underwhelming for most of the season, and they seem to have had a couple of good performances recently against Lille and Aberdeen, signs that they're maybe turning the corner. So I mean, if Hearts were to get the Celtic of 2 weeks ago, you would say they've definitely got a chance. If they're to get the Celtic of yesterday, then it's going to be a whole different ballgame. But certainly, I mean, as Stephen says, Hearts, nobody really gave Hearts much chance in last year's Scottish Cup final, and they arguably should have won it. They were really strong, the better team for 75 minutes, and then a couple of mistakes from Zlamal and Berra ultimately let Celtic sort of get the victory. But Hearts have got a good team. That's the thing. I mean, people look and say they're a championship team. They're not a champ. They are championship in terms of the level they're playing at. But
demoted, not relegated. Is that what we're going for?
That's a top 4 Premiership team. I got ridiculed for suggesting that by some people on Twitter a few weeks ago, but Michael Smith would walk in any team in the league outside Rangers and Celtic.
Yeah.
Stephen Kingsley, any team in the league outside Rangers and Celtic. Stephen Naismith, if he's fully fit, walks in any team outside Rangers and Celtic. Liam Boyce, any team in the country outside Rangers and Celtic. You could go through that team. Halliday would still get in most teams out with Rangers and Celtic. The goalkeeper, obviously. Yeah. The goalkeeper would probably get in any team in the country. I mean, that's 6 players I've reeled off there that would get in any team out with Rangers and Celtic. If Hearts turn up, they're capable of making a game of it. I'm not saying they would win the game, but they've certainly got a chance.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. And we were talking off air, obviously, before we went live, and we were saying about would Craig Gordon get both a winners and a losers medal because it's last year's Scottish. And you made a good point as well, Stephen, about Andy Halliday, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, Halliday actually got knocked out of the competition by Hearts and then could potentially win it with Hearts. I mean, I don't think that's ever been seen before.
Ever there was a fact of 2020, that was definitely it. Yeah. So like we said, we're shaping up for a Christmas Scottish Cup final, Hearts versus Celtic on December 20th. Other games from the weekend, the Rangers beat Killie 1-0. Another penalty, Tavernier penalty. One thing that really stood out for me, and I've talked to many people about this, is the rugby park surface. Stephen, what's your opinion on it? I mean, you're giving a wee tut and a shake of the head already.
It's not good at all. I don't personally agree with the 4G pitches at that level of football. I mean, I understand from Kilmarnock's point of view and Hamilton's point of view that it was probably a money-making scheme for them. They could hire it out to community organisations and boys' clubs and stuff like that and make a bit of money off it. But, I mean, come on, guys, we're a professional organisation. I know Scottish football, I mean, you can't have that a Rangers and a Celtic are going and performing so well in European competitions and beating teams like Galatasaray, can draw in with the team that's at the top of the French league, and then the following week have to go and play on a 4G pitch, which you would see at Pennycook Centre. You know what I mean? It's not a good pitch at all. But the Killie boys train on it every day. So again, that's a massive incentive for them to potentially keep it. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the only one in the league. I'm right in saying that New Douglas Park, Hamilton and Livingston as well. Yeah. Have you got any views on these sort of surfaces, Anthony? Sorry, it's twice I called you that.
I'm not a fan either. I mean, again, I understand why they're there, but for me, they're not suitable for top level football in a country like Scotland, where we've got a sort of proud football heritage. As I say, I do understand why they're there. They're financially, they help these clubs, but not for me. I don't think the sort of the optics are good when you're watching a game and you see a plastic pitch and you can tell it's a plastic pitch. I don't think that looks good.
Nah, definitely not. Like I say, I can see the reasons behind it, but I mean, at the top level in our country, I kind of agree with you guys. It's maybe not ideal. A couple of unsung heroes I want to talk about from games at the weekend. Greenock Morton against Ayr United. Now, Greenock were 2-0 down against Ayr United with 82 minutes played. They scored in the 83rd, 85th and 88th minute to go and win 3-2. Brilliant. Superb. Also, another result I want to talk about is Cove Rangers. They beat Partick Thistle 1-0. Now, guys, if we cast our memories back maybe 3 seasons ago, where Partick Thistle were and where Cove Rangers were, surely that is a massive success story in Scottish football, Anthony. Would you agree?
It is a success story, but I think it's probably more a reflection of Partick Thistle's slump than it is of anything else, because obviously Cove Rangers have got a good bit of money, they've done well to get to where they are, but Partick Thistle in League... I mean, in saying that, Partick Thistle shouldn't be in League One, or they certainly shouldn't have been demoted on the basis of where they were at the point we went into lockdown with a game in hand. So I think it's obviously a bit of Partick's slump and a bit of Cove Rangers doing well.
Yeah, and obviously the man in charge at Cove is Paul Hartley, Stephen, a good Hearts man. Is he the right man to lead that team forward through the leagues? I
love Paul Hartley. He's one of my heroes as a player, but I'm still not convinced about him as a manager. I think he did pretty well at Dundee, but then he's... And to be fair, he seems to be doing a pretty reasonable job at Cove. I think the only reason he's at Cove, if I'm not mistaken, is I think his father-in-law is on the board or something.
Is that right?
Yes, but he's got Alan Combe there as his goalie coach now as well. So again, a guy with loads of experience for Stubbs' Hibs team. So they've got a good setup there, and they're the kind of teams that I think that, not to kind of hark back to all the politics that we had in the summer, but you had all these teams that were voting against the kind of reconstruction, and because you have a lot of teams in that League Two in Scotland who are just happy to be there. They're just happy to kind of dot around, and that's nonsense. Like you've got like teams like what's Barry Ferguson's
Celtic Hearts,
Celtic Hearts that have got a bit of money behind them and obviously a bit of ambition to even get somebody like Barry Ferguson as a manager. They're signing guys for like Inverness and stuff like that. Like they've got a bit of ambition. Like get out their way. Either let them join or just go. Like.
And they obviously fell victim of COVID, if you like, because they really should be playing Celtic Hearts. It's a good example. Barry Ferguson's team should really be where Brecon City are at the moment. Would you agree, Anthony, or am I wrong in saying that?
You could argue they could. I guess it would depend on how the playoff went. If Brecon...
exactly. But they never even got that far.
Yeah, they should have got the chance in some way. They should have been given a chance to at least play a playoff of some kind.
Well, the thing is, Brecon have not won a game, I think, since December last year. Like, they haven't won a competitive match. So, like, they were absolutely in freefall. And I know it's an easy thing to say, conspiracy theories, get the tinfoil hat on, but Ken Ferguson, who's their chairman, is on the board of directors for the SFA. So, like, one of the main guys who was making the decisions when it came to restructuring the league and kind of what information was getting put out to teams for the vote. So, I mean, as much as people will say it's an organisation now that it's flawed, it's massively flawed, Scottish football. They need to kind of get back to, not get back to the old Jim Farry Blazer days, but get back to having someone who knows what they're doing running the game and making this. The fact that Neil Doncaster is having to go to the clubs to ask permission for them to then make decisions on what they do if COVID hits again and everyone goes into lockdown. That, to me, sums up everything you need to know about Scottish football.
Yeah. I mean, we had the perfect chance for a reconstruction. I did a podcast on my other show with James McDonough, who's the Edinburgh City manager, who made a great point that in his division with Edinburgh City, the bus companies are making more money than the football clubs.
Yeah.
He would travel down to Stranraer, up to Elgin City. We had the perfect chance for a reconstruction to localise it, give Celtic Hearts, Brora Rangers a chance to come up a level, if you like, and completely restructure it. We had the chance, we never took it. Like you say, that kind of sums up Scottish football. Do any of you guys have a view on that? Should that have maybe been done when we had the chance, or is it best just leaving it as it is?
I like the 12-team Premiership. I'm probably in the minority in that. So in terms of reconstructing for the sake of it, I would have said no, stick with what you've got. And certainly in terms of the top flight, I'm not saying that we couldn't regionalise the lower leagues, but I like the 12-team top flight with the split towards the end of the season, the top six and all that. I think it's quite unique, and I quite like the quirkiness. I always think you get good fixtures at the end of the season because you've got the top six, the best six, if you like, all playing against each other. And then you tend to get the relegation dogfight in the bottom six. And I think that adds real drama, assuming there is still plenty to play for at that point. But in terms of this summer, I mean, given what happened to Stranraer, Partick and Hearts, there definitely was a strong case for reconstruction just to try and do the right thing by these clubs, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned it earlier, the phrase demoted rather than relegated, because there was obviously still things to go. But hey, that might just be an excuse for certain clubs. We'll move on and we'll have a look at some of the fixtures coming up in the week and the weekend to follow. But before we go any further, Celtic and Rangers. Celtic have maybe hit a little speed bump in the journey of the season. What are you guys seeing at this early stage? The first ever podcast that we've done as a team. We'll put on the record now, at the end of the season, who do you see lifting that trophy? And we'll start with you, Anthony. Go for it, mate.
It's Celtic.
I
think Rangers are absolutely flying, and they're clearly overall they've been the form team this season. But I just think we've seen enough times that Rangers can be flying and suddenly they hit the skids, and Celtic just find some resolve from somewhere. I mean, we're still relatively early in the season.
Yep.
Neil Lennon's been through sticky patches before. He knows sort of how to ride them out. He's obviously been getting a bit of flack recently. I mean, I'm not saying Celtic will definitely win it, but if you had to ask me to pick between Celtic and Rangers right now, I would go Celtic just on the basis they've done it before. And when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, have Rangers got what it takes to get over the line? They're unproven in that regard. I'm not saying they won't do it, but we've seen from Celtic that they can do it.
Perfect. So, Stephen, I give you a £10 to put a free bet on. Who are you putting it on to win the league?
I'll go Rangers because you'll probably get more money. To be honest, like I agree with pretty much everything Anthony's just said. But I would probably, just to be controversial, go for Rangers. I think what Anthony said is bang on. Celtic have been over the course before. They've got guys who kind of know how to drag that extra 5-10% out of yourselves when you really need it. The only thing that I think plays into Rangers' hands at this moment in time is that there's no fans in the ground, and that basically their messages that they're getting from the Beale, well, I say Beale first because I think everyone the consensus is that he's the main man there, but you've got obviously Steven Gerrard and Gary McAllister, and I think if their messages that they can clearly put to the team, which I think showed in the Old Firm game, they can follow a plan. And if there's no crowd, there's no as much pressure, I think the experience over the course of these things potentially becomes less of a tool. So it's tough to call, as you say. There's not enough of the season that's gone past.
Well, we've got the record anyway. Anthony, you went for Celtic. Stephen, you went for Rangers, and I'm just going to sit on the fence and not give you an answer. But what we will do is we'll mention that both the clubs are in Europa League action this week. Rangers are away to Benfica in the Europa League, and Celtic, they're at home to Sparta Prague. Rangers, like you say, they're doing well at the moment. Do you expect them to get a result away to Benfica, or are they going to try and defend and shut up shop? Or do you think that they're more interested, like you say, and maybe focusing on the league, Anthony? What do you think on that?
I think Rangers have shown enough in Europe to suggest that they can trouble any team. They seem to produce their best in Europe. If you're asking me if they're going to beat Benfica, I would be reluctant to say that. It's in Portugal, but it is in Portugal, isn't it?
Yep, it is. It's away, yeah.
But certainly, I mean, Rangers go and attack generally, don't they? They'll go and have a go. I'm sure they'll probably score at some point in the night, and then it's just a case of whether they can hold firm and keep Benfica out. But I mean, as with no fans, anything can happen. Rangers could go there and win, and it's not beyond possible.
Do you think either one of these clubs would be not happy, but maybe relish the extra time to devote to the league, Stephen? Do you think that, like I said, they're not going to be happy to be put in the Europa League, but to have that extra time on top of the other team that's maybe still in the competition, do you think one of them might secretly just...
I think for different reasons, probably no to both, because I think Rangers, they're still trying to obviously rebuild a reputation. It doesn't matter what any Rangers fan says, they're still trying to rebuild that reputation from when they went out the box. So they need to try and still establish themselves as being back to a European giant of such, like at a certain level. Whereas I think Celtic, they've just got Celtic have got that history, they've got that past. Like they've won the European Cup. You know what I mean? Like they can't just dismiss for 10 in a row. I know it's important and all that, but what happens after 10 in a row? That's the question I would always ask every Celtic fan. Like, where do you go after that? If you're happy just to put all your eggs in one basket and go for 10 in a row, whether you achieve that or not, you're always going to have a season after that finishes. So what are you going to do if you abandon your morals and where you've built your club, which Celtic always pride themselves on being a European club, then where do you stand on that? Like, you can't just abandon what you think about, like how your club is viewed by everyone across the world. So for different reasons, I would say that European football is probably important to both, but it might get to a point where after Christmas,
prioritise. Yeah,
they might go, right, listen, we've done all right, we've not made a fool of ourselves, we've made it to the last 32, whatever. If we go out the night, no bother. So
yep.
I don't think Lennon or Gerrard would ever have the outlook that they're happy to go out of Europe, to be honest. I think they both want to go as far as they can in the competition.
So you won't see a B team being played or certain people being rested in Europe, you think? No,
I'd be very surprised.
Yeah. So Celtic, they're at home at Sparta Prague. Is it important for Neil Lennon to carry on this winning streak, Anthony, do you think? Has he turned that corner now after the Old Firm defeat and obviously the draw against Aberdeen? Is it up to Lennon now to kick on?
I think it's too early to say they've turned a corner, but certainly it's eased the pressure in the short term, and you'd be surprised if they weren't capable of beating Sparta Prague on Thursday. I mean, Celtic are generally a decent team in Europe. I mean, it's not going to be an easy game by any stretch, but you would fancy them to, certainly in a full house Celtic Park, you would fancy them. But I mean, it's this thing with no fans, you just don't know what effect it's going to have on any team.
That's it, and it might be a while before we see them coming in, isn't it? Unfortunately. So having a look at the Scottish games, it's actually all being played on a Friday night. So you've got Aberdeen versus Hibs at Pittodrie. Who do you fancy for that one, Stephen?
At Pittodrie, I'm going to say Aberdeen. They beat them at Easter Road earlier in the season. Hibs, obviously both teams are just off the back of disappointing semi-final results, but I don't think Aberdeen were. I think if you spoke to any Aberdeen fan, they would probably be thinking, we're probably going to get scudded by Celtic, whereas I think most Hibs fans would have, deep down, would have been pretty confident about beating Hearts, whether that was rightly or wrongly. They would have looked at this as an opportunity to kind of put a few demons to bed, and they obviously didn't do that. So it's how both of those managers can kind of get the best out of their team and kind of turn these things around. And I think Derek McInnes has got a proven track record of just getting the best out of that group. So I fancy
both
them.
teams looking to bounce back, like you say, after an exit of the Scottish Cup.
It's a real test for Hibs, because they are, as much as they've been having a great season so far, losing the derby just changes everything in terms of the vibe. Straight away, Jack Ross goes from really good manager to suddenly you've got a few noisy sort of critics, if you like.
Well, this is the thing, even the results like the 1-0 win against Ross County and stuff, folk will then now start looking back on that and going, oh well, actually that wasn't a very good performance, and like if you add that to the Hearts game, and it completely changes the vibe, as you say. And it is a massive game for both teams, really, because Aberdeen really they've got a very, very strong team, and no doubt about it, they've pushed that budget out like this season again, so they really need to kind of cement themselves as being in third place. And I think if they beat Hibs on Friday, that goes a long way to doing that. I
think that's probably the fixture that stands out from Friday. The other fixtures you've got is Ross County versus Livingston, St Johnstone against Killie, and St Mirren are at home to Dundee United. On the Saturday, the big game in that league is Hearts versus Inverness Caledonian Thistle. John Robertson brings his men down to Tynecastle, a return from them. How do you see that one shaping up, Anthony Brown?
Hearts will be the favourites, obviously, as the title favourites. They're at home and they're coming off a really big result. I mean, the big test will be, can Hearts rouse themselves again? They've gone and won this game against the odds, so to speak, against Hibs, and then now they're back at Tynecastle again, no fans, but that didn't do them any harm against Dundee. Put in a really good performance there, but that was the first night of the season. It was under the lights and what have you. This will be a different type of test because it's going to be during the day. It's not going to have the same hype as last Saturday's match or even the Dundee game a couple of weeks ago. Robbo always brings his team to attack, so they'll be dangerous on the counter. Inverness, they'll certainly be capable of scoring goals. But I mean, this Hearts team looks pretty strong. I would fancy them to win. Whether they win convincingly, I'm not so sure, but I certainly think they've got enough about them to obviously maintain their 100% record in the league.
Perfect. Thanks for everybody that's been interacting on the show. A lot of the comments aren't broadcastable, if you like, and if you do come with some decent suggestions, we'll put it to the guys and we'll have a wee chat about it. So, in case you don't know, Anthony Brown, he's a Scottish football writer, and he's wrote a book about Hearts' famous 1998, reminiscing with legends on the famous 1998 Scottish Cup win. Now, you're at Tynecastle today, you told us off there, and you were mentioning to us about the tributes that have already been laid for Zaliukas. Excuse me, Zaliukas. Your book is going to be available at the Hearts Club store, isn't it, Anthony?
It is, yeah. I dropped some off today, so they're going in later this week. They'll be available in the club shop. So that was a really good thing to sort of materialise, if you like. The book's officially launched this Wednesday, although it's been on pre-order for a few months, and quite a lot of people have already got their hands on the book because the first batch of pre-orders from August and September went out at the tail end of last week. But yeah, it's been a really enjoyable period for me personally. I mean, obviously the writing the book was enjoyable but also pretty gruelling, and it was obviously during lockdown there was a lot of sort of up and downs, if you like, and then but since I've finished it, since I've got the hard copy in my hand, and just the last few weeks of sort of promoting it and just engaging with people about it and getting it to the players and to Jim Jeffries and what have you, it's been really good fun, really enjoyable. So,
were you surprised at how sort of generous a lot of the guys were with their time and like obviously openness and things like that? Did that surprise you, or did you know enough of them kind of pre-writing it that?
A bit of both. I knew some of the guys would be no problem. Obviously Lockie, Gilles Rousset, these are guys I've dealt with before, and obviously lovely guys, really helpful. Love Hearts and what have you, but I hadn't spoken to all of them, so I didn't know. To be honest, when I first started, I wasn't expecting to get them all. I thought I'd maybe get 3/4 of the team, perhaps. So if you told me back in April or whatever that I would have had all 11 that started plus Gary Locke, plus Jim Jeffries, plus Jim Hamilton, who came off the bench, and all the guys around the sides to contribute to the book, I would have been absolutely delighted. So in that regard, it's been brilliant in terms of getting the whole team together, because for those that don't know, I was a Hearts supporter as a boy, and probably that was my last season of watching them regularly, the 1997-98 season, is going week in, week out, home and away. And then I started to sort of pursue a career in journalism after that, so I would only watch Hearts sporadically, and then obviously I went into covering Hearts in a professional capacity. So the 97-98 team, if you'd said to me on that day when Hearts won the Cup, you'll write a book and it'll feature all these guys that have won the Cup, I would have just laughed at you. I mean, that's the bit that over the last few days I've really been quite sort of proud about, and the fact that I've got pictures with these guys with my book and they're telling me it looks great and looking forward to reading it. I mean, that's superb. I don't think anything I'll do professionally will eclipse that.
Nah, that's superb, Tony. And like I say, it's available at the Hearts Club store. It's getting near that time of year. It's coming to Christmas. It'd be a great stocking filler for any Hearts fan. Where else can we purchase it if we can't make it to the Hearts Club store?
You can buy it online off the website. It's legends98.bigcartel.com, and you can purchase in hardback or paperback form.
Perfect. I've just been flicking through some of the comments. Thanks to Joseph. He's commented, "Call me mad, but I think Scotland have a real good chance against Serbia." Great point, Joseph. We started there, Stephen.
Hold on, I saw the Serbia squad announced this morning, and every one of them is like playing at the top level in Spain or Germany or Italy. I don't hold much hope.
So you would call him mad? You would call
Sorry, Joseph.
Nah, but I mean, hey, it's 11 versus 11. You never know. It's a one-off game. Do you fancy your chances, Anthony?
I would be stretching it to say I think we'll win, but I certainly feel marginally more confident about playing Serbia than I would about playing Norway and Haaland, because of the superstar factor of Haaland. I'm not saying Serbia don't have stars, but I always feel when Scotland come up against a team with a superstar, the superstar always turns up. Gareth Bale with Wales, for example, and I just think it would be a situation where Haaland would be destined to sort of steal the headlines had it been Norway. I think with Serbia, they're still massive favourites, but you never know if Scotland go there and stifle them and can pull off a result like when McFadden scored in Paris. I mean, it's going to take an almighty performance to do it, but with no fans in the ground, again.
I was just going to go and say that without the Tartan Army, I mean, that's like a 12th man, isn't it?
But equally, it's a 12th man for Serbia as well.
In Belgrade, the Tartan Army wouldn't have had a chance to say a word, because you wouldn't see them through the smoke. I think it's probably a huge positive for Scotland that there's no fans rather than a negative for this game, because, I mean, they can be very intimidating and scary places to go.
So again, thanks for all the comments that's coming in. Thanks to Sean Ross. Good show, boys. Is this going to be a regular slot? Enjoying the content. Cheers. No, thank you, Sean. That's a nice comment. I do appreciate it. Yeah, we're going to be doing this every Monday from 7 o'clock till 8. Like we say, we're called the Play On Podcast. We're playing on from the weekend's action. If you like, we'll discuss some of the key points, some of the games, and we'll look ahead to the week's action coming as well. So every Monday night from 7 o'clock until around about 8, depending on how we're chatting. If it's going well, we'll keep it going a wee bit after 8. Why not? So a couple other things just to quickly talk on. You mentioned, Anthony, about Gareth Bale and his performances for Wales. He's obviously made the transition from Real Madrid back to Spurs. Is that a good move for him, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think some players are just have a bond and affiliation with it. I mean, you look at Rudy Scatchell, I know it's a totally different scenario, but some players are
much
just
better than
perfectly suited to certain clubs, and Bale's obviously had a difficult time at Madrid in terms of all the friction with the management and what have you, and this is as good a place as any for him, I suppose, to go and try and rediscover his mojo, if you like.
Mm-hmm. And he got on the score sheet this week as well, so well done, Gareth Bale. Just touching on a couple of the results down in England as well, and a couple of the big points. Jordan Pickford, he was dropped at the weekend for Everton. Has that been coming for a while, do you think, Stephen? Does he have to be dropped?
I think so. I think as soon as they signed the Swedish boy,
is it Olsen?
Robin Olsen, I think. As soon as they signed him on deadline day, the writing was on the wall for Pickford, I think, because up until that point, he just consistently makes errors. Like, I know that I'm maybe a bit old school and stuff, but like modern day goalkeepers scare me, because a lot of the time the emphasis is on can they kick the ball, what's their distribution like? I'm not being funny, mate. Your first job is to keep the ball at the net, and Jordan Pickford was increasingly becoming worse and worse at that. So as much as he can kick the ball well, and he looks good with the ball at his feet. I think with his hands, and I think that Liverpool game where he obviously injured Van Dijk.
Yeah,
I think that was maybe the final straw for Ancelotti. I think he's just his rashness and kind of rush of blood to the head, nature of kind of what he does, especially given the fact that Everton are looking really good in other areas of the park. So if they can kind of get that side sorted out, but then saying that, they got beat. So they got beat at the weekend. So yeah.
That's it. Well, I mean, Newcastle maybe turned a bit of a corner. I mean, they've made a couple of good signings. I mean, the boy Wilson, I mean, I think he scored 2. But yeah, I mean, another talking point from the English Premiership is Man United getting beat again, 1-0 from Arsenal. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, is he the right man to lead Manchester United forward, do you think, Anthony? Or was that a rash decision appointing him, do you think?
Man United have been in a malaise since Ferguson left, so I'm reluctant to put too much of the blame for that. Any manager's door. I mean, Mourinho's been in there, Van Gaal's been in there, Moyes has been in there, Solskjaer's gone in there and had his moments. He's had good moments, he's had some terrible moments. I'd be reluctant to say it's all his fault, because obviously it seems like there's a real sort of difficulty in terms of Ed Woodward's situation. He doesn't seem very good to work with from a manager's perspective, so I mean, I dare say they will change the manager soon enough, because the manager always carries the can, but whether that will elevate them to being a top level club again, I don't know.
Yeah. Looking ahead to some fixtures on Sunday, we see the return of Celtic and Rangers. Celtic are away to Fir Park to play Motherwell, and Rangers are at home against Hamilton. Would you imagine a win for Celtic, a win for Rangers, or Motherwell? They're looking not too bad. Stephen, what do you think? Can Motherwell cause an upset against Neil Lennon? Or
no?
No, simple as that.
I think it's 3 points. I think Motherwell have turned a corner. They had a really bad start to the season.
Because Tony Watts hit a bit of form, I think. He's seen him scored.
Yeah, I think they tried like 4 different strikers before they sort of came upon Tony Watt, and I'm not sure who else is actually playing off him, but I think it took a while. But the thing I quite like about Stevie Robinson is he's never backwards about going forwards in terms of if something's not working, he'll just rip it up and try something else. Yep. He's not one of these managers who picks a system and just sticks with it rigidly. He's quite happy to like leave out big players and kind of move people around, and so I don't think Motherwell. I think Motherwell will be 5th or 6th in the league again, but yeah, I would expect. I mean, it's a massive story if Rangers lose to you say Hamilton we were playing.
Yeah, Motherwell, Celtic, Rangers are at home to Hamilton. Yes.
Yeah, it's good to see Tony Watt doing well. He's just a really likeable guy away from the football. I remember when he signed for Hearts in 2016, I think it was, under Nielsen, and there's always this baggage with Tony Watt that he's a bad egg and what have you. And I'm very much a sort of take him as you find them sort of person. And Tony Watt sat down next to us at the press conference, and you're expecting this real arrogant little cocky boy to come through, and it just couldn't be nicer. Real pleasant guy, really endearing guy. And I think people are now starting to see the way he is on social media that he's actually a genuinely good guy, and he's not this sort of headbanger that he was portrayed as just because he scored a goal against Barcelona and didn't quite kick on as people are doing.
He always had a good rapport though with fans and stuff wherever he went. Like I think the Charlton fans still really like him, and like everywhere he's kind of been.
But he still had a reputation.
100%.
He had this reputation of being bad news. I mean, I think I'm not even sure Craig Levein was totally convinced by him. But to be honest, he's just, you can see that he's just a decent guy. He's maybe made some daft decisions at times, but he's not a bad egg. It's good to see him sort of
hitting a bit of form now. Yeah, definitely. Thanks to Fraser Smith for the comment. The job is far too big for Ole. Pochettino should be the man in charge at Man United. Would you guys agree with that? Pochettino, could he make a difference at United?
I saw his haircut on Monday Night Football earlier, and Pochettino's getting anywhere near a job with a haircut like that. So.
I'm saying nothing about haircuts.
He's probably the obvious choice if and when they fire the bullet at Ole.
The thing is with Man U though, they need to kind of like, they've tried getting the big name, the success. Like they went for Van Gaal, a natural winner. They went for Mourinho, he's won pretty much everywhere he's been. They then went for, we'll go back to our roots, we'll get a guy who knows the values of the club. That's all very well and good, but unless you've got a tactical side of things to go along with that, like I think if you had Ole or somebody similar to him as maybe a figurehead, and then I think he's got Carrick and somebody else, a young guy underneath him in the coaching capacity. And Mick Phelan, who was obviously Ferguson's number 2. But I just think he needs a more sort of disciplinary figure there to kind of just let them know what it means to play for Man United. I mean, Roy Keane's
it's funny you say that. We talked about Roy Keane. I mean, we'll come in a second. Thanks to Ian McIntosh for the question, the comment on social media. Following Fergie is mission impossible. I mean, he did set such a high bar, didn't he? He really did. I mean, Alex Ferguson, what a manager. What a manager. I would have loved to seen him in charge of the national squad, but that's just me. Going back to Roy Keane, there's rumours about him going at Salford City. Can you see that happening?
I don't know how a guy like Roy Keane is going to get on with guys who are maybe not at that level. Like, I think even if you looked at some of the stories that sort of came out of when he was at Ireland and he was ripping into guys like Jonathan Walters and the left back for Stoke, I forget his name, but if he's coming up with guys that have been playing for Rochdale 2 years ago or have come for the conference, I just don't know how Roy Keane deals with guys like that. But I don't know, stranger things have happened.
Yeah. Is it just a case of the class of 92 pulling in their mates and seeing who can do it? But I don't think Roy Keane would give up his punditry stuff. What do you think, Anthony? Do you think he would take up that role? I suppose it all depends on his personal circumstances. Is he looking to get back into management? Is he happy doing his punditry? Because he's very good at the punditry, isn't he?
Yes, he's not my cup of tea. I think he's a bit of a sort of shock jock the way he does things. To be honest, that people enjoy stuff and I understand that, but not for me. I think he's trying to almost be controversial.
He's like a clickbait pundit, eh? Like he says things to kind of get people talking.
Yeah.
But the thing that I find I don't really like about Keane is the fact that he's obviously good friends with Solskjaer. Like he never ever talks. But see if a player puts a foot wrong, like David De Gea had a couple of bad games. He's slaughtered. He says if I was in that dressing room, I'd be smashing him in the face or whatever. Because his mate is doing a bad job as the manager. Well, you need to give him time.
The blame, yeah.
Like, come on.
So before we wrap up the show, one big game as well happening on Sunday out with Rangers and Celtic is Man City Liverpool down south. That is a huge game. How do you see that one panning out, Anthony?
What's the goals? I think that's probably the likelihood in terms of winner. Take your pick, really. I mean, Liverpool are not as convincing by any stretch as they were last year. Man City are obviously having a rocky time as well. It could go either way. It could be a big, high scoring sort of
boring.
Could be 5. Well, it could be 5-0 either team the way they're going. They're both so erratic at the minute.
What about yourself, Stephen? How do you see that one going?
Again, it's tough to call. I mean, Liverpool are still Liverpool for last season. I know Van Dijk's not there anymore, but they brought in the boy Nathaniel Phillips, who is supposedly a young lad, but I looked him up. He's 23. Oh. Like at 23, you should have played 250. You should have played 250 games for a club or something. Like, how is a guy at 23 making his debut for Liverpool, having played like 9 competitive games somewhere else? Like, but. He looked good. He looked really good when he came in. So, I mean, if they can get some sort of partnership between whoever's going to go in, whether it's Matip or Joe Gomez or whoever, if they can get some sort of partnership there, the Liverpool defence, as much as Virgil van Dijk was lauded, it's literally just a base for their front three. So they have that. Well, I say front three. They've got obviously Andy Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold, who bomb on and give them the width. But then the rest of the team is basically designed to allow them in the front three to go and express themselves. So if all they're really looking for is a solid base, and if they can get that, I think that they can cause problems to City, because I don't know, Aguero's not really firing yet. He's still just coming back from injury, and I think Gabriel Jesus is out. So they've not really got much going forward. I mean, their midfield is still capable, but.
No, it should be a good one. It should be a good one. Looking forward to that. Thanks again to Fraser for another comment. Fraser Ogilvie. Great first show, guys. Looking forward to being a regular. Well, we look forward to you being a regular viewer. If you have enjoyed the show, please like it, please share it, please tell 10 of your friends, get them to tell 10 of their friends, and we'll grow the show from there. So, I mean, that kind of wraps up the first show. Join us next Monday at the same time, same place. Thanks to our colleagues tonight. Thanks to Anthony Brown. Go out and get his book. Thanks to my dear friend Stephen Commins.
Go out and get his book.
It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Join us same time next week for the Play On podcast.